Disney Cruise Line is back with yet another brand new cruise ship. It's the Disney Destiny, and it's now the third vessel in the Wish class of ships, the class that is now establishing the new direction of this once boutique cruise line. I just embarked on a voyage aboard the new liner, and like many of the older and newer Disney cruise ships, I have a lot of opinions. So join me today as we set sail on a rather expensive 5-night cruise and see what this ship has to offer. This is my review of the Disney Destiny. The Disney Destiny is now the 7th ship in the Disney Cruise Line fleet, and now the 3rd ship in the controversial Wish class. We have always known about this 3rd ship, as it was first announced back in 2017, as at that point, the last order from Disney for this new class of ships. That would later be changed though, as at the time of writing this, Disney has exercised their options to order an additional 2 Wish-class ships. One which is set to launch in 2027, and the final will actually be owned by the Oriental Land Company, which also owns Tokyo Disneyland, and as such, will operate in the Japanese market. Regardless, this 3rd ship would begin construction in late 2023, and a year later, Disney would announce its name to be the Disney Destiny. This new ship would be themed all around heroes and villains. Of course, since this is Disney, this also meant that many more Marvel properties would be injected into the ship, which made me very curious as to how it would all be pulled off. Regardless, the Destiny would set sail in late November 2025, and since I've for some reason been dedicated to making a new review on each one of these new ships, I of course booked a sailing. This time, a few months after its maiden voyage, since who are we kidding, what am I really missing out on not being the first? Honestly, and maybe it's just me, but I really haven't seen much hype around this ship. At the time of writing this review, most YouTube videos about the ship are not getting a ton of engagements, and one of the few that actually does have over 1 million views is a short of TikTok influencers opening a media preview package from Disney. Even the cruise line as a whole has seen a decrease in overall ratings on sites like Cruise Critic over the last few years, mainly due to a dilution of their product and offerings. But I think it's also a lukewarm reception to these new ships by longtime DCL fans. Despite this, the company is pressing ahead with their new fleet strategy, positioning the Destiny at their Port Everglades home port in Fort Lauderdale, and placing it on sort of a mixed bag itinerary schedule. The ship will sail itineraries ranging from short 3-night cruises all the way to longer 7-night voyages. We booked something in the middle, a 5-night voyage in January, a rather uneventful one that would bring us from Port Everglades to then spending a full day at sea, where we would then call upon Cozumel, Mexico the next morning. We would spend another day at sea before reaching our final port of Disney's private island, Castaway Cay. Following our return back to Florida, it would total out to 1,364 nautical miles. When it came to booking our room on this trip, we decided to do something a little different. Originally, I booked a concierge room, intending to showcase the massive ship-within-a-ship concept that Disney has sadly adopted. However, I ended up not going with that option, and I'll get into why that was later in the video. Instead, we got an inside cabin, from one of the most expensive rooms to one of the cheapest. We did, however, get a pretty great location on Deck 11. The room itself, though, well, it wasn't our favorite. While the placement of our cabin was fantastic, tucked within its own private hallway next to a bunch of concierge cabins, the space itself was, not super well optimized. Granted, the layout of our particular cabin is a little non-standard, but it is more or less the same across the entire ship. At around 169 square feet, this is a small space. You really wouldn't want any more than 2 people in here, even if the couch turns into a small bed. You do have a pretty standard vanity area and mirror, lots of lighting fixtures, convenient shelves, and a pull-out mini fridge. Across the space you'll find several closets, all with plenty of hangers and some shelves. I did find that there was a lack of drawers in the cabin though. The bed itself is by far the highlight of the space. I've always thought that Disney Cruise Line has some of the best beds on any cruise ship, and these queen mattresses with very soft fret linens are just so comfortable. I truly get some of the best sleeps at sea on Disney, and that is a luxury genuinely commendable, especially for their lowest tier of cabin. I also really like that both bedside tables have 2 plugs, as well as USB-A and USB-C. Above are dimmer switches for the 2 sconces, which are perfect for making this a cozy, dimly lit space. What's much less cozy, however, is the mural above the bed. I've never liked these on the Wish class ships. I've always thought they look a little tacky, but this one especially is just hideous. I'm sorry. It is unfortunate considering it is the only drop of color in a rather bland cabin. I just wish they found a better way to incorporate it than this. The murals have always looked like lazy ways to throw IP into cabins, and if they're going for a single unifying theme around the ship, it would be great to see that reflected in all of the cabins across the board. I know they need to mass produce these cabins and keep them cheap or whatever, but I really just think this is such a lazy design for their immersive cruise ship. And if you're not sure on what I mean or what I would want, all you need to do is look back to the past. Remember, a big innovation on the Dream class was the introduction of the magic portholes. A screen shaped as a porthole that had live camera feeds to the outside depending on where your cabin is positioned on the ship. Every once in a while, a character or special activation would pass by the window, creating a unique and surprising moment. Disney actually created a small trend with this innovation, and it made the confined and dark interior rooms a lot more desirable. Obviously, those innovations and upgrades are now gone aboard this new class of ships. And once again, I'm not sure how you can argue that this isn't a downgrade and Disney cheapening out. Regardless, while you do get a large TV with some on-demand movies, which are complimentary, the TV doesn't swivel at all. So if you're in bed watching something, you have to crane your neck over to the left to see it. Finally, there's the bathroom, and just like the rest of the stateroom, it's pretty small. Now, unlike the vast majority of Disney's other cabin types, there is no signature split bathroom design here. Instead, it's all contained within one rather tight room. Generally, I thought it was pretty functional and clean, though a little bit hard to move around. Interestingly, the Wish class, unlike the legacy Disney ships, doesn't have a deluxe option for their inside category. Those ships which do have a deluxe inside stateroom option have more space, and critically, the split bathroom design. The Destiny only has the standard inside variant, with a tight space and that single bathroom design. That's not really a criticism per se, these ships just have much less inside staterooms, it's just more of an interesting observation. Overall though, I thought the room was comfortable, and while there are some annoyances and space issues, it's for the most part very functional and perfectly comfortable. But this is a new Disney ship after all, one themed all around heroes and villains. So what is new on board? Well, it's important to remember that the Destiny is part of the Wish class, following the same general arrangements and platform from Meyerwerft, her builder. So basically everything structural and layout-wise will be nearly identical to her sister ships, the only difference being some reskinned spaces. So the fundamentals of the ship are going to stay the same, and in my opinion, remain highly flawed. I have a full video reviewing the Disney Wish before I actually made this channel over on Bright Sun Films. I'll leave a link below which will take you to that video, and that's a place where I really air my grievances on every small detail on this class of ship. Regardless, the first of the newly rethemed spaces on board is the Pride Lands. This is one of 3 main dining rooms you rotate through during your trip. The Pride Lands Festival of the Lion King is a dinner show themed all around African culture, food, with a healthy restraint of using Lion King IP. I found it all to be very tasteful. Aside from the pole I was again placed behind, the actual show elements of the dinner experience I thought were very strong. I loved the live performers, I loved the music, the energy, it was all really well done, and by far my favorite version of this restaurant on any of the Wish class ships. One of my only gripes with it continued to be the windows on the back, which are still completely useless most times this dining room is in use. The continued lack of depth in materials used is also especially pronounced in this area. Like the space is supposed to be rugged and textured. Think something like Disney's Animal Kingdom Lodge in Orlando. Yet here, you'll find nothing but flat panels and faux wood. The most egregious example of this is out in the entrance hallway, which is lined by these thin sticks bound together. Except instead of actually building out that vision with some sort of real textured material, it's just a cheap veneer. The real carved wooden art pieces out on the walls, however, do look amazing. Although seeing those, a textured real piece, right next to the flat veneer, it just shows how awful everything looks in comparison. Back to the positives though, the food was pretty great. While the peri peri shrimp was mid at best, the standouts for me were the red roasted capsicum soup, the roasted chicken, and the pan-seared corvina. 1923, the ship's more formal dining room was also pretty great. While my tortiglione pasta and Emmy Caesar salad were just okay, the filet mignon, tortelloni, corn chowder, plus the lobster salad I stole from Dan were all excellent. Now, because I truly loathe the Marvel restaurant on board these ships, which by the way, I'm not alone on, our friends Michael and Danny, who were sailing with us on board, decided to conduct a very scientific survey on their door to see which restaurants people like the most. And again, very scientifically, we determined that Marvel is just bad. Case closed. Anyways, we decided to skip it and do something different this trip. Like all Wish-class ships, there are 2 upcharge specialty restaurants on board. There's Enchanté and Palo Steakhouse. We dined in Palo complimentary based on our Castaway Club status, and the food there, while it has declined and gotten more limited over the years, was still pretty good. I wouldn't spend any extra money on it, but as a complimentary specialty restaurant meal, I enjoyed it. My steak there, which is supposed to be their signature dish, was decent, but not anything special. Enchanté, however, was indeed something special. This was our first time trying this restaurant, which carries a Michelin-star chef's pedigree behind it, as well as a hefty price tag. Here you can choose between a la carte offerings or 3 different prefix tasting menus, the most expensive of which is the collection at $215 per person. I should note too that this menu has steadily been rising in price since the restaurant's introduction on the Wish, which back in 2022 was $195. Regardless, I ended up going for the collection menu, while Emmy did the vegetarian portagere, substituting a chicken main course. As expected for the price point, everything was pretty incredible. Each dish was fantastic, perfectly prepared and served ceremoniously by an incredible team of crew. Even small things like leaving sauces at the table and the friendly atmosphere around the dinner was extremely appreciated for such a high-end restaurant. It wasn't overly pretentious, the atmosphere was formal yet jovial, and I thought it was just great. However, between Emmy and I's 2 tasting menus and 3 glasses of wine, the total came to $498 for dinner, which, aside from maybe special celebratory dinners or something, I just would probably never pay that again. Finally, going from the highest end food on board to the most casual, the Destiny still has food out on the pool deck, which continues to be the best casual eats on board. The barbecue, pizza, burgers, and Mexican food are all very reliably good, and was where we ate most of the time. Marceline Market, the ship's buffet, is continuing on with the trend of just being okay. I found the selection to be pretty lackluster, especially compared to the previous Disney ships, and the food we did get was again just okay. We almost never chose to eat there for lunch, and only had a small breakfast as options ran thin, just like its thoroughfares, which are often packed to the brim during serving times. Perhaps our worst experience though, actually no, this was definitely the worst, was the Cookies Barbecue at Castaway Cay. There, you can usually get a pretty great, yet limited spread of food, like ribs, salads, burgers, and chicken sandwiches. However, when one of our friends traveling with us bit into one of those chicken sandwiches, we found out that the entire thing was pretty much just raw. Not great. Other than the health and safety violations, the food on board the Destiny is more or less the same as the other Wish-class ships. But what about the other new spaces and activities? Well, altogether, the Destiny has around 8 new spaces on board, including the Pride Lands. Perhaps the largest and most prominent of which is the new Grand Hall. The Marvel elements are already in full effect here, as this is all based around Wakanda from the movie Black Panther. I think this space is extremely underwhelming and pretty cheap looking, honestly. Of course, we have the return of fake marble everywhere, lots of flat surfaces and cheap looking materials, and the chandelier. While colorful during events, I think it's pretty underwhelming and not very spectacular like the other Disney ships of the past. Perhaps the cheapest looking design motif in the lobby are the geometric designs in between the decks, which from the concept art, I figured would be made up of various textures and materials, giving it depth. But no, it's actually just wallpaper, which totally shocked me when I first saw it. I honestly don't even know if I would say this is overly Wakanda themed to begin with. The design elements that do hint to it are very subtle, and most people will probably just miss it, apart from the Black Panther statue as the ship's character centerpiece. And really, overall, after previously sailing on the Treasure, where it at least looked like Disney was attempting to put effort into fixing the design sins of the Wish, when standing in this lobby, it just seems like all of those efforts are nowhere to be found. I mean, one of the main focal points of the atrium is literally a blank white wall. Could they have not put some tapestries there or something? It's just such an overall downgrade from the mosaics, foliage, and decorative elements on the treasure. And even that, again, I'm sorry, I think is a downgrade from the original Disney ships. But anyway, just off the lobby, you have DeVille's, a piano bar that structurally suffers from the same issues as the other ships, mainly with capacity and by the fact that the main entrance feeds people directly into the middle of the space. So if there's a dark, intimate mood during a piano set, it's kind of interrupted by people walking in, usually looking for open tables, which are usually never available. Aside from operational issues, I do actually like the space itself in the way it was themed. I think they did a good job here, and the drinks on offer, while pricey, are pretty creative. Across from this is the Sanctum, a Doctor Strange themed bar, and a space which I think is just fine. Doctor Strange's brownstone in the film is a mystical, richly decorated space, and this, well, it's a themed bar with, again, a lot of fake wood and flat surfaces. The high-end, yet blindingly sterile shops that surround it are a visual intrusion to any immersive experience that could be had here. And there are, yet again, ongoing capacity issues during events, with people spilling out of the venue and crowding the main thoroughfares. The only saving grace here for me is the bartending staff. Mainly Javon, who is back. We met him on board the Treasure last year, and he's now sailing aboard the Destiny. He continues to be the coolest bartender afloat, and he is seriously one of the best memories of this trip. Really, all of the hardworking, often enthusiastic crew on board are pretty spectacular. One thing that still makes Disney Cruise Line very special. Our waiter Wilfred totally transformed our main dining room experience. They're just all so great. Now, a deck above, you'll find Saga, the 2-level event space. It's also themed after Black Panther, though unlike the Treasure, which I actually thought did a pretty good job with the theming, here you'll find a rather flat, I would say is a barely themed space that still has many design issues that just can't be fixed. It's really not a great venue for the amount of people on board. I do, however, like the tapestries out in the hallway. I thought at least that was a nice touch. The last majorly themed lounge on board is Cask and Cannon, a sports bar themed around Pirates of the Caribbean. The design differences between this and Keg and Compass on board the Wish isn't exactly clear to me, though this space is certainly better appointed and has tons more detail. It's certainly not as good as the Periscope pub on board the Treasure, but I do like its atmosphere. It's a shame that Disney had just built a rather great bar in the Magic Kingdom with the same theme, and I do wish that level of detail carried on into this space as well. Now, the Destiny also has a few other smaller rethemed spaces on board, most of which are not all that exciting. There's a new sweet shop themed after Edna Mode, and another 2 coffee shops just off the lobby on deck 4 and 5. Perhaps the best part about this ship, though, is the continued emphasis on live entertainment. Much like the Treasure, the Destiny has a comedy duo that you'll often find hosting various events around the ship, some of which are highly interactive. One of the meet and greets was hosted in Saga, and it was this whole thematic show that incorporated the meet and greet in a very creative way. Other events, like the With Great Power show, started out with an incredible singer, but lost me a little bit with a comedy, which just isn't for me, and, oh god, Deadpool. The Disney studio has always been a mysteriously marked location on the Wish and Treasure, yet it was seemingly never used for anything and didn't even show up on deck plans. Actually, it still doesn't even here on the Destiny. But exclusive to this ship is a special, intimate meet and greet with Dr. Facilier, where no photos or videos are even allowed. It's a pretty cool idea, and despite a long wait to meet him, it's a highly rated experience. Hercules is also the new Broadway-style show on board, performed in the Walt Disney Theater, and I thought it was pretty good. I loved the puppetry, I loved the soul music, the muses were incredible, and I thought the show, though maybe a little weak at times, was overall something you should see if you like theater. Something that is far less advertised is the Disney Uncharted Adventure app game, which we heard very little of on board. This is also coupled with the interactive Haunted Mansion themed scavenger hunt game. This sort of replaces the Muppet Detective game that was on the Fantasy. However, unlike the Muppet game that was free to play, this one requires you to have a Magic Band Plus, which ranges from $45 to $65, which is just insane. Perhaps my favorite event, however, was the Cruella de Vil show inside the DeVille Lounge. This was a super fun show based around building a song for the character with audience participation. It was a ton of fun and my favorite show on board. Clearly, many others wanted to see it as well, since the line out the door snaked down the hallway, with quite a lot of people not able to get inside. Again, capacity issues. I actually asked how many people were on board our sailing. Despite a 4,000 passenger capacity, our cruise had 3,552 passengers on board. So even when not sailing at capacity, once again, I found that all venues on board were often crowded and overflowing. It wasn't often, if ever, we found a moment's peace in any of the lounges during the day to just sit down, enjoy a drink, and talk as a group. Everything was always so loud, there was always so many people everywhere. Honestly, by the final day at sea, it was becoming a sensory nightmare for us. And I think that just highlights the continued issues of these ships. I mean, pick a gripe I've had with the existing Wish class. From a lackluster water slide, only one public hot tub, a small crowded adults area, the constant use of fake materials, the continued addition of upcharge and sales pitches on board, the fundamental passenger flow and confusing design, and there's just so much more. I just have so many issues with these ships, and the only thing added on this ship that I don't think is a downgrade from the Treasure is the Pride Lands restaurants. Everything else just feels like a worse version of the previous venues. In some cases, even worse than the Wish. From a value perspective, I feel like this trip was just worse than others too. We did drink a little bit more on this ship than others, and compared to the classic Disney ships, prices here are much more, especially without any happy hours. I mean, if anything summarizes the modern day Disney product, when Emmy went to order a simple mojito, a random bartender then suggested that she tried a $25 cocktail instead, one that seemingly had nothing in common with a mojito that she asked for. Even the value we got out of the extra premium experiences just left a lot to be desired. During our day on Castaway Cay, we as a group decided to get a cabana, and the family beach variant was the only one left available. Now, we've gotten a cabana before on Castaway. It was one at the adult beach, and at the time, in 2022, it was around $500. I honestly found that to be a pretty good value at the time. Today, the family beach cabana, which is notably more expensive, cost us around $1,000. That was despite the weather at Castaway being pretty chilly and cloudy, certainly not warm enough for swimming. We also found that cans of Coke in the fridge were literally 2 months away from expiring, there was barely any privacy, and even if we did want to swim, well, the beach just said no. Apparently, our cabana was placed on a part of the beach where during certain moon phases, halfway through the day, the tide will recede to basically take away all of the water on a good chunk of the beach. I know this is all circumstantial, but Disney knows the tide phases ahead of time. And if it's seriously this bad, there should be a warning on the website.
And we got a view. There was ocean, not anymore.
Especially after paying $1,000 for basically just a few extra chairs inside a wooden hut, and a few other inclusions like bike rentals and snorkeling equipment, I just don't think it really makes up for the terrible value that this turned out to be. Now, all of this criticism isn't to say we didn't have a good time. Aside from the many ship design issues I have, and the ever-increasing expenses of modern-day Disney, we as a group of friends did have a blast. We got to spend time with all of our friends and meet some awesome crew on board. My fondest memories from this trip are our late-night chats up on deck, chatting with Javon, and all of us biking around Castaway, an activity that was at least complimentary with our cabana, and actually ended up being the highlight of our day. That's the stuff I'll remember most from the Destiny. But apart from some key entertainments and the crew, the ship is just mostly forgettable for me. But honestly, a lot of this can be forgiven if the price point was a little more in line with what you might value this experience. So then, what did we end up paying? Well, for 2 people in an inside cabin, I paid $3,346 USD. That's very expensive for an inside cabin. But on equivalent 5-night itineraries on the Destiny, that same cabin can be had for a low of $3,000. A deluxe ocean view stateroom like the one we had on the Treasure can be had for around $3,540, and a deluxe veranda room at around $3,793. Again, those are the lowest rates currently available. From there, you then get into the concierge staterooms, which is honestly a joke with how they're priced. A concierge family veranda stateroom, which is basically just the same as a standard balcony room, starts at $7,423, while the concierge ocean view variant that looks forward on the ship is around $7,700. Like I mentioned earlier in this video, when I first booked this cruise, this is the cabin we got. I had wanted to try out the concierge product on these ships and check out what in the concept art actually looked like a uniquely designed room since it appeared to have different furniture, adopting a mid-century feeling. Well, thankfully, the more I thought about it, the more ridiculous I found this price point to be, and how much more I could get out of doing literally anything else. So I saved the money, and it's a good thing I did, because the actual room design they went with doesn't entirely reflect what I thought they were going for in the concept art. Anyways, if you do want something bigger, like a 1-bedroom suite, that'll cost you around $10,400, while the 2-story royal suites come in at $29,500. And of course, like all Wish class ships, and now sadly the Dream class too, there's the Destiny Tower Suite. Located in the forward funnel, it has no outdoor space and continues to look down upon the Currents bar, or rather have people look up into your room. If that sounds good to you, on a 5-night sailing for 2 people, it can be yours for a low price of $35,700. Oh god. But getting back to our cabin for a minute, at the $3,300 price point for an inside cabin, you do have to ask yourself on what the value looks like compared to other products out there. If you're a couple not traveling with kids and just looking for a fun ship with lots to do, of course Royal Caribbean is usually going to be at the top of your list. For a 5-night sailing aboard the relatively new Symphony of the Seas, one of their Central Park interior cabins go for around $1,280 for 2 people. For something in the premium category, you can sail 5 nights on Virgin Voyages in a balcony cabin for $1,690, which is honestly an incredible deal. If you want to go even more luxury on an upper premium small ship line, you can do a 6-night ocean view cabin in the Caribbean on board the Azamara Journey plus $100 in onboard credit, all for $3,260. Even if you want to stay with Disney, there are 5-night voyages on the Fantasy, which I think have far superior inside cabins, which can start around $700 less than the Destiny. But let's break this all down and give it a Jake's Isn't Any Good score. It's based on 5 categories, each out of 10, for a potential perfect score of 50 out of 50. We'll start with the staterooms, and despite our cabin having some weird and rather annoying quirks, it is functional, and I would say a premium cabin for this type. I would give it a 7 out of 10. Food I thought was generally pretty great. Enchanté was fantastic, the complimentary poolside food is always very good, and the main dining room had more hits than misses. It was only Marceline Market that I thought was below average. I think much like the Wish and Treasure, it's an 8 out of 10. The ship itself, however, is in almost every way a downgrade over the Treasure for me. Honestly, the only thing that brings it up a little higher for me over the Wish is the continued inclusion of the Haunted Mansion bar, which is fantastic and probably the best space on any of these ships. Everything else just continues on with the trend of cheap-feeling veneer, confusing core design choices, and seemingly little thought about a cohesive story over duct-taping random IP that Disney owns. It also doesn't help that I have very little interest in Marvel anymore, so the themes of this ship are just not at all of interest to me. It's a 5 out of 10. As for experience though, I do think this is where Disney shines the most. You're still getting an excellent pirate party, even though some aspects have been scaled down. You do get the fantastic fireworks show, you get to travel to Castaway Cay, which is in my opinion still the best private island of any cruise line, as well as the fantastic service that DCL has been known for. Now in fairness, you do get all of that on Disney's older ships, and in my opinion better ones, but what is exclusive to the Destiny is the entertainment. There's always something to do, and even if the venues aren't always designed for the capacity, the ongoing creativity of the activities is something to be commended. I think that experience warrants a 7 out of 10. Finally, there's value. You're averaging out at nearly $700 a day for 2 people. That makes this one of the most expensive inside cabins you can get for this type of itinerary in the entire cruise industry. For me, just based on that fact alone, it's a 5 out of 10. That brings the total score to 32 out of 50, which puts it just behind other premium ships like the Valiant Lady, Celebrity Solstice, and the sister ship Disney Treasure, but only 1 point ahead of the Disney Wish. To wrap this all up, when I was making this video, I read a review that called this ship the most adult Disney cruise liner to date, and I just couldn't be any further away from that opinion. The Destiny, like all of Disney's Wish-class ships, is gearing themselves more towards younger children. This ship has fantastic children's facilities and programs, but at the same time, they've de-emphasized the importance of adult areas and secluded escapes, betting more on the fact that the modern-day adult passenger don't bear the same opinions and requirements as the parents of the 90s. Guests that needed an escape from non-stop Disney action. They're betting that the average adult passenger is a Disney adult that wants to revel in any shoehorned IP all day. As an adult passenger with no children reviewing this ship, I'm just not that type of passenger and consumer. I'm sure this ship appeals to a lot of people, but I'm just not one of them. And I'm certainly not any more swayed in thinking these ships are better products than the classic Disney fleet. Surprise, surprise, I know. This ship is just something I will likely never return to again. So that's my take on Disney's newest ship. Usually these videos either make people totally in agreement or completely against me, so I am curious on where you stand. Of course, let me know in the comments below, as I do read each and every one of them. As always, my name is Jake, and thank you very much for watching.